Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's last post ceremony. My name is Troy Clayton, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Cheryl Elston. We warmly welcome Air Vice Marshal Kim Osley and the attending members of 30 RAAF Academy Course and 113 Pilots Course Reunion Group. We thank you for your service. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We also acknowledge the members of the RSL Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching this ceremony broadcast across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the National Anthem. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we'll read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private George Reuben Robert Green. George Green was born on the 10th of June 1896, the eldest son of George and Eliza Green of Bendigo, Victoria. Educated at the Gravel Hill School, George went on to take up an apprenticeship as a carpenter with Sweeney and Sons in Bendigo. His father, who worked on the town hall staff in Bendigo, had served during the Boer War. George shared his father's interest in the military and served in the light horse unit of the local senior cadets. He was described as a bonny, bright lad, of lovable disposition, although he had a quiet reserve with him that made him even more lovable. A lad of very fine physique, a thorough horseman, and a good all-round athlete. George Green enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force shortly after the outbreak of war in 1914. As he was just over 18 years old, his father wrote a letter of consent and said that he would have gone himself if he was not too old. George was accepted for service with the 1st Reinforcements of the 13th Battalion and left Australia on the 22nd of December 1914 on board the troop ship Berrima. Private Green arrived in Egypt in February 1915 and continued training in the desert for several weeks. On the 10th of April 1915, the 13th Battalion began to leave its training camp in Cairo to make the journey towards Gallipoli. Arriving on the island of Lemnos a week later, the men undertook boat drill, scaling ladders, swimming, and undertaking preparation to land on the Turkish coast. The advance parties of the Australian troops were already ashore on Anzac Cove when the 13th Battalion left Lemnos at 10:40 a.m. on the morning of the 25th of April 1915. The battalion began to disembark in the evening, and by the following day was at the head of Monash Valley, helping to establish the defensive line. 2 days after landing on Gallipoli, Private George Green was shot dead, probably by a sniper's bullet. His friend, Private Cyril James, wrote to Green's mother to say, "Well, we fought on until the 28th of April, the day George got killed. He fought well, never thinking of himself. His thoughts were occupied fighting for king and for country. After he got shot, he only lived for a while. He thought of home besides his country. He asked me when I got back to go and see you." James's letter brought comfort to Mr. and Mrs. Green, who were glad to think that their son was tended by a comrade in his dying moments, and his dying thoughts were of home. In Bendigo, it was reported that George Green's wide circle of friends, while proud of his sterling patriotism and manly qualities, had felt his death very deeply and have expressed their sincerest sympathy to Mr. and Mrs. Green. If George Green's body was recovered from the battlefield and buried, his grave has been lost. Today, he is commemorated on the memorial to the missing at Lone Pine, with nearly 5,000 other men with no known grave or who were buried at sea. He was killed a little over a week before his 19th birthday. His name is listed on the Roll of Honour on my right among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private George Reuben Robert Green, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the reading of the Ode and the sounding of the last post.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old, Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We'll remember them.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget. We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Poziere or in the low scrub at Gallipoli with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. But in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support of the Memorials Development Project. We particularly appreciate your visit despite the challenges posed by COVID and wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.